Why is everybody moving to Austin?
The supply of housing here stayed about the same in 2020 as it did in 2019, but the demand went way up in 2020. So what happened? And what does that mean for 2021?
A lot of people have been hitting the like button on the city of Austin.
Seriously.
We'd appreciate it if you do the same and you don't even have to move here.
And hit the subscribe button too if you want to get videos from us that we release every week.
We are Alyse
And John.
with the Heart of Austin Homes team, which is a tight team of real estate ninjas here in Austin. And we've been seeing this really strange, interesting shift in the real estate market here over the last 3 months that we figured we'd share with you.
Normally markets rise in the spring, peak in the summer, and then cool off in the winter. But 2020 certainly sent us for a loop because surprisingly, just as many people listed their home for sale as they did in 2019.
So even though inventory was crazy low, it wasn't because people weren't selling, which we now know with confidence, because the year is over.
Instead, it's simply because there have been more buyers. Look at this chart. The red line is 2020. All of the other years look pretty similar. And then there's this kind of oh crap moment when COVID hit in March. But by July, people from all over the country decided Austin was a better place to be than wherever the heck they were, and it stayed like that ever since.
So why are people moving to Austin? Well, if you type moving to into Google, Austin and Texas are going to come up in some of the top results for the autocomplete.
Now, keep in mind those are geocached, so wherever you are, that's certainly going to influence it, but Austin and Texas do come up a lot.
So what makes people move? We have 6 main reasons.
Well, the first is income potential. Not necessarily ranked in that order, but the first one I'm going to talk about. And so the median income in Austin is currently $71,000 a year. Now that's a household income. And so if you're moving metros, how much money you can make there really matters. So we're going to compare 3 other cities which are also popular metro spots, and those are San Francisco, Seattle, New York, and Austin. So those are the 4. So the median income, according to the US Census Bureau in 2019 for New York City was $63,000.
Isn't that weird? That feels weird to me.
Yeah, you think it'd be higher. I guess everyone thinks of New York as being like high finance, so everyone's making killer money, but
Yeah.
they're a very small portion of New Yorkers are
Maybe
actually
there are a
in
lot of
finance.
single people living in apartments.
Yep.
Or something to that
There's
effect.
all the artists up
the
there too, right?
median household income is still a single person living in an apartment?
Yep.
Maybe?
Yep.
I don't know.
Absolutely. And so San Francisco, by contrast, is $112,000, right? Seattle is $92,000 household income, and then Austin comes in at $71,000 of household income.
Yeah, which is interesting. Better than New York City.
Yep.
Would not have expected that. The second reason is the cost of living. And this is what makes that median household income thing actually relevant.
Super important.
Right? So in San Francisco, the average home price is $1.3 million.
And that's not like a super fancy house. That's like a 3-2 under the highway.
Yeah. And then in New York, it is $690,000. Actually, more reasonable than I would have expected for New York.
Still a lot for a house.
Yeah, it's true. And then in Seattle, it's $773,000.
Yeah, a little bit more New York.
Which is also, I think a lot of my Seattle friends would disagree with that, but you know, there's always beer in. And then next up, finally, Austin. Well, I mean, as of a month or 2 ago, that was at $450 for average home price, and now it is up at $560.
Yep,
So,
as of early March 2021, whenever you're watching this. Okay, so the third thing is really a combination of the two. So we're cheating a little bit, but we're just dividing the median home price by the median household income. And so if you look at New York, that number is 10.9. So that's the ratio of earnings. It would take 10.9 years of your earnings if you applied it all to housing to purchase a home. And so the higher that number is, the less affordable a metro is. In San Francisco, that number is 11.6. And in Seattle, that number is 8.4. Now, as of a couple of months ago, when the median home price in Austin, and this was literally just 2 or 3 months ago, that ratio was 6.3. And as of today, in March, early 2021, that number is 7.8.
So you would have to work for 7.8 years just paying towards your housing to pay off your house.
Yeah, and
you
you
paid
paid nothing else, right? Which is unrealistic, but the
Just 1, 2, 3, 4,
ratio...
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, I'll owe you a Coke. But I think that the number is important because once those numbers kind of level out, then other metros start to look more compelling. So it's not very long before Austin reaches Seattle at 8.4. So the median home price in Austin would have to reach $600,000, and given a median income of $71K, then Austin would be on par with Seattle. And now people might start going like, hey, well, Seattle's starting to look good compared to Austin.
Although if our ratio has gone from 6.3 years of income to pay off your house to 7.8 years of income.
Yeah, Seattle's may change in the future
exactly.
too.
Theirs may have changed as well. There is definitely some migratory things happening. And Austin is a, I don't know if the benefactor is
it's on the receiving end for sure.
End of that. But you know, their ratios could be changing as well.
Yep.
A fourth reason that people move is for their spouse.
Yep.
And we find that we don't think that a large portion of the people moving here are moving for that particular reason.
Well, we kind of moved to Austin for each other.
We did, but together.
The fifth reason people tend to move is for the quality of life in that city, for the vibrancy and kind of the feel of what that city has to offer. And I think a lot of people might be moving to Austin because it is a little bit of a smaller town. It's certainly not little, but it's also not big like New York or LA or Seattle.
Well, it really has that small town feel. I mean, you have so many parks and trails and beers under the twinkle lights. And I mean, all the things that really brought us here 14 years ago.
And it's also mostly single family neighborhoods really close to downtown. So if you can get into one of those, like, hey, you can have the house with the backyard and you're not that far from downtown, which most cities you can't do.
Definitely. I mean, that's not generally going to happen in San Francisco, New York City, or Seattle.
Yeah, and I don't know if Austin will keep that vibe, but it's holding on to it for a little while.
Yeah, that's the hope. A sixth reason that definitely plays into it is proximity to family. I mean, you're not too far from either coast being in Austin, right? You have family on the East Coast, you have family on the West Coast. With today's migratory patterns for people who are just out of college or et cetera, there are a lot more couples that are bridging two different coasts. So Austin is a happy middle ground.
Yeah, you don't have to do the flight from east to west, like, oh no, I'm not going to move from New York to LA for you, but Austin's kind of a compromise. You're not that far from either, right?
I'm using this site called Numbeo, which quantifies the quality of life index by city, and you can do it across countries and stuff, but I'm just going to do it for North America. And most of these cities fall inside the United States. You can see there's a couple in Canada, but assuming that, hey, if you want to cross borders, let's just look at this list, right? So this is currently sorted by quality of life index from 1 down to 63. And the number 1 on the list is Raleigh, North Carolina, which I actually used to live in. It's a great place. Followed by Madison, Wisconsin, then Columbus, Ohio, then good old Austin, Texas. So already in the top 5 if we're just looking at these metrics, and they use a quality of life index, a purchasing power index, safety, healthcare, cost of living, property price to income ratio, commute time, pollution, and climate. And at the bottom of the list, again, this takes everything into account. You've got Detroit, Los Angeles, New York, Philadelphia, Winnipeg, and Hamilton. So again, 2 of the big ones are Los Angeles and New York. So let's say that we were to go back and sort this by cost of living index. Boom. Austin, Texas comes out number 1. Worst cost of living index, New York, right? Then Honolulu, then San Francisco, right? Then Anchorage, Alaska, then Oakland, California, which is basically a suburb of San Francisco, and then Seattle, right? And so those are all the places that people are coming from to Austin, with its cost of living index being the lowest. And if you look at the property price to income ratio, we've got Detroit, Michigan is the best at the very lowest. So that's the most affordable, but you got to live in Detroit. And then the worst is Toronto, followed by Vancouver, then New York, Honolulu, Boston, San Francisco, Oakland, Los Angeles, right? The same sources of people migrating from to locations that have a low property price to income ratio. Although Austin still doesn't make it super high on this list, we've got to go all the way down to 26. So it really, Austin still kind of lands in the middle when it comes to property prices, and we're continuing to see them increase. So who knows, maybe over time Austin will get up toward the top of that cost of living index. But for now, if you look at the quality of life, and if you're looking at just this set of metadata, there's a pretty good case for people coming from the most expensive locales to the ones that are the least expensive, or at least have a good cost of living index and are still sunny and have great things to do both in the city and around the city in terms of outdoor life.
So have you considered moving to Austin?
Or leaving Austin?
Yeah, because it's now too expensive? I would love to know your thoughts in the comments below.
So here's the other side of that coin. A lot of the companies that decided to move here, They did that before this latest housing frenzy even started. I mean,
they
we
did it
have
before COVID, right?
2 Amazon shipping centers, a huge 5,000 person Apple campus, a huge 5,000 person Tesla campus, a new Facebook campus. Samsung's considering a large campus. And now SpaceX has announced a new campus, and there are a plethora of smaller companies that are like 500 to 2,000 employees as well that have announced that they're moving here. And they announced all of that before this frenzy even started. So do we have places for them to go? No, largely we don't at the moment.
And those buildings, they're not even done yet, right? So all those companies that are coming to town,
They haven't started hiring.
the jobs aren't even here.
Yeah.
Right? So once the jobs actually show up, there's going to be even more pressure.
Definitely. And what you'd hope that building would be influenced by that. What do you think about that?
Well, Austin's kind of a unique city when it comes to construction. It's not like Phoenix and Las Vegas. And the reason I point those two cities out is because those are big, boomy cities that grew a lot and they suffered a lot in the collapses and the housing collapses in 2008. But they've also got lots of land. Like Phoenix is just a big desert. It's just a moon base. There's nothing there but rocks, right? Same thing for Las Vegas. So land is really cheap and it's flat. So it's really easy to build on. Whereas Austin is hilly, it's got clay soils, it's got rivers, it's very, I wouldn't say very difficult to build on, but it's more challenging and it's not as flat and simple as those other markets where you have these big housing booms.
Which makes for cool trails and things like that.
It does. It makes for a much, nicer green environment, but also the city of Austin is, the COVID has impacted the permitting offices, so they're much slower to permit everything because they're all working from home, and I don't know, I guess that's slowing things down, but I know that my permits that I've had in are taking a lot longer than they should or longer than they used to. Austin is also a small city and they're behind on their infrastructure. Like they don't have enough water and sewer infrastructure and they've been building it at a frantic pace and they've been charging developers more for adding water taps and water bills are going up to pay for all of this expansion because there's just not enough water for the population growth of Austin. So if you are a sewer constructor or a plumber or you want to get into water sewer on the commercial scale, Austin's going to be a great place to be for the next 20, 30 years.
I joked to John the other day, I was like, hey baby, you want to get into water and sewer?
Because, I need another business like I need another home. Here you can see the permits that are issued by the city of Austin. They're about the same in 2020 as they were in 2019. So if we keep having all of this demographic pressure and people moving in, but we're not able to build more houses, that only means one thing for pricing.
So honestly, we love living in Austin. And, hopefully it keeps its character and all of its charm as it continues to boom and grow so quickly.
Yeah, and that's hard to do because, that quaintness and the musician scene and all that's really becoming much harder for musicians to afford to live here. So I think that it's going to lose some of that charm, but at the same time, I think it's also going to be this big metroplex of, innovation and industry, and you've got medical, space now, technology. So I think it's going to be a really vibrant and exciting place to live, at least from the economic standpoint.
Definitely. And I do know that the city, whether or not they're succeeding at it, is attempting to keep the character and grow the infrastructure quickly, regardless of success.
Yeah, you can have affordability, growth, or preservation. You can have 2 of the 3, and that's it. But you can't get all 3. And right now, I think that Austin is choosing preservation and growth, right?
Thank you guys so much for watching. We would be honored if you hit the little like button and maybe the bell and the subscribe so you hear about when new videos come out.
Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys.